seconds.
You ready for me?
Yep. Recommendations of the Compensation Committee. Amy, would you?
Yes.
Hey, Mark, this is Catherine. We'll put you on speaker, okay?
Okay.
Yep, see ya.
All right. So today, let's see. We have quite a bit to cover. So happy to take comments or questions as we go along, but just keep in mind that we do have a lot to get through, and I would like to get through all of it so that you can consider everything. So let's try to stay on track and not deviate to other things as we're going along. So we're going to go over the CPI and our comparison group, the market increases, elected official salary comparisons, the finance reorganization costs with an elected auditor, pager pay, insurance renewals, and 401k match. Each of those could probably take a full hour, so I will talk very fast and very clear. Let's see if my mouse is not going to work. Well, there you go. Okay. So this is the Consumer Price Index. It may be familiar to some of you. This is what the CPI has been doing over the past year, and I'm showing you year over year where we're at. So while it looks like it's going down, we're still at a 3.9. So better than we were last year at the 8.3, but that's where we're at. So just information to keep in your mind as we talk about different things.
Really quick question though.
Sure.
So it went up to 8, but now it's down here. So like if we gave people raises up there, aren't they above the rate? Or like is that a little too simplistic way to look at it?
Very too simplistic.
Okay.
Yeah, I wish it was that easy.
Right.
That would make my job a lot easier. Okay, so this is our comparison group, and right there on the left-hand side is right out of our policy talking about that we compare to a minimum of 8 other counties and 5 cities in the state of Utah. So those are the counties that we compare to, second and third class counties, and those are the cities that we compare to. Those are the cities that the Compensation Committee decided were the most comparable to where we're at. And then we also take into consideration different salary surveys from Western Management Group. A Davis County survey was done that I participated in, and I received those results, which is nice because I didn't have to pay for it. A Weber County attorney survey, the state of Utah survey, and then also TechNet. So we're getting lots of different information from different places to be able to make the best analysis that we can. These are increases as far as I have been told from my colleagues from other comparison groups. The top 4 are going to be the cities, and as we all remember, they're on a different budget year than we are. They start their budget in July, so those are solid numbers of what increases they did give. So you can see that they're roughly around that 4 to 5% for a COLA or a market adjustment, and then some did a merit adjustment or a merit increase on top of that. The counties are there. Those 5 are the ones that I have some knowledge of what they're proposing. They haven't been passed yet, but we can see where they're kind of sitting there. And then if we take the average of all of those, we're looking at 4.85%, either a COLA or a market adjustment, and then on a merit about a 2.62. PayScale is a provider of compensation data, and they're predicting that pay increases in 2024 will be about 3.8% across the board. So,
is their prediction there for PayScale on the private sector or the municipal sector?
It's going to be a combination.
Is it?
Yeah.
So Davis County is not proposing any increase in COLA?
Right. Not that I'm aware of. They may have changed that, but it's not anything that they reported in our group email that we had going. So. Technology is not being my friend. Hang on.
Dean, can you
there we go.
So the glare is up there.
Okay, so this can be a very confusing slide, so I want to explain it well so that you understand. This is the average in the market changes. This is not the increase that our people need. This is how the market has moved. And so I took the comparison from the 2023 midpoint of the pay range and compared it to the 2024 mid-range or midpoint of the pay range to see how that had fluctuated. And so with the appraisers, the midpoint from the 2023 pay range to what the 2024 pay range midpoint is, it was an 8% adjustment there. And so that's how you can see that down. Does that mean that all appraisers needs an 8% increase? No, that's not what that means. That just means that the market has adjusted and we need to make some adjustments according to how people are in that pay range. As I've done that analysis, the approximate amount that we need for market adjustments is about $575,000. And then last year you started asking with benefits, what does that mean? And that's goes to $725 with benefits. With a merit increase, the recommendation, historically, we've done a 3% to the overall budget. That would be about $400,000, and with benefits would be about $500,000. So just to keep that in mind. Yep. And that is those market adjustments and those merit increases. The market adjustments excludes the sheriff and the attorney because we'll get to their slides in just a second. The merit increases would include attorneys but exclude the sheriff's office because they don't have merit increases. Theirs is built into their pay plan.
So can you explain just really quick merit increase? Does everybody automatically get one? Is it done over time? Is it done based on reviews? How does that work?
Yeah, so when we talk about a merit increase, basically it's the pay for performance. So they have an annual evaluation that's done. We'll start those on November 1st. They're due by December 1st, and they do a self-evaluation, and the manager does an evaluation, and then we get the scores. We take those scores, and we have a merit matrix, and depending on where that employee sits in their pay range, versus what their score is will determine what type of percentage they're eligible for. So it could say that someone's eligible for 2 to 3%, and then we would prepare a spreadsheet for the manager, and we would say Sally is eligible for 2 to 3%. That translates to 50 cents to $1. How much do you want to give her in between that? That's what the manager decides upon.
So that for that $500,000 for the merit increases could be less. That's not an automatic, but everybody's just going to get that.
Right, right. Yeah, not everyone would get a 3%. It's variable depending on where they're at in their pay range and also what their performance evaluation score was.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. So this is a really good visual that kind of tells a really great story. The two blue lines are our minimum and our max in the survey for the pay ranges. The green dots are where our employees are sitting within those ranges, and the red is going to be your survey midpoint. We can see from this that most everyone is falling pretty closely in between those two blue lines, which is really what we like to see, right? We can see that concentrated, those green dots are more towards the lower end. That would be more of our entry-level type positions. And then towards the higher end, those are going to be more of the professional type positions that I don't know, that make a little bit more and have more responsibility there. We can see that there's just a few outliers. We can see that there's a few outliers on those underneath that minimum line, and so that's where those market adjustments would need to be made. But also because people are sitting in between the minimum and the maximum doesn't mean that they're making where they need to be for their time and position. And so that's where we would be making those other market adjustments, determining where they're sitting in their pay range, and if that's the right spot where they need to be, and then making an adjustment at that point. So, any questions on that graphic?
Diamond, Cass County are actual.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
Diamond, the last one, Cass County are actual. You got Cass County actual and Cass County
Yep,
are.
so the R actual, that's the regression analysis, and so putting everything into a regression analysis, that's showing where our pay plan should be lining up, and we can see that it's lining up right along that midline, which is where we like to see it.
So what does each dot represent?
Each green dot represents the employee's actual pay, and then the blue dots on the blue line are representing a survey maximum or a minimum for each job.
Obviously, we don't have every employee on that graph.
Every position is represented, not every employee, yes. Okay, so the sheriff pay plan, I told you that those numbers didn't include the sheriff's pay plan. Currently, the starting rate for a deputy is $24.30 or $50,544 annually. This is the market analysis that we have done, comparing to Tooele, Davis, Summit, Brigham City, Ogden, Utah County, Logan City, and Smithfield City. I cannot. So sorry. With that, we can see that those areas that have been circled, those are our biggest competitors, being Brigham, Ogden, Logan, and Smithfield, because people can drive from here to there to work pretty quickly and easily. And so we can see what those rates are and where we're sitting at our 2430 in comparison to theirs is a couple 28s and then a 27 and a 25. So this is their starting rates, yes.
So we slid again,
We did, unfortunately.
even to Smithfield.
Yeah.
Yeah, would you take care of that city, would you?
What is the Smithfield number? I can't read it.
25, 23.
I think my computer has frozen. Hang on, let's see what we can do here. There we go. Okay. So talking with the sheriff, he has decided that the best way that we can be competitive is to match what Logan City is paying, because they are our direct competition. So proposing the starting rate be raised to $27.56 per hour. That would be $57,324 annually. The cost for this increase is it's a 13.5% to the sheriff's budget. Without benefits, it's $1,070,000, and with benefits, it's about $1.5 million. Okay, our next one is the attorneys. And with the attorneys, I've just talked with Dane. Dane, I don't know if you want to take a minute to talk about the situation that the attorney's office is in.
So unfortunately, since the last time I spoke to you, when I let you know we had an attorney leave, we've had another attorney leave. In that same time, we've had the job open. We've gotten 2 applicants, probably 1 applicant that we're planning on interviewing. Talked to several others who just aren't interested at the pay range, even with the pay range that we talked about last time. So me and Amy talked about maybe moving, and there's a whole bunch of things with numbers and moving the midpoint up a little bit to get us more in line with some of the counties we're competing against. I'm hoping no one else leaves between now and the next time I see you, but that's kind of the reality that we're in. I know this is one of our special victims unit attorneys. He submitted a letter of resignation. Me and Amy have talked about maybe providing that to the council, because he kind of lays out his reasonings and his wish that he could stay, but having to make financial moves for his family. So that's the position we're in as an office. I can tell you, I was down at the Utah Prosecution Council Civil Conference last week when we found out, and I got several texts from people in our office saying, "Hey, things aren't looking good here. People start leaving. Morale's kind of tanking at this point. People are knowing now I'm taking on a whole bunch of extra work, and I'm underpaid, and people are leaving to get more money." So I'm advocating on behalf of the people we're working with. They do an important work to protect public safety, and so I just ask that you take that into account when Amy goes through this and when you're making those decisions.
Who's our biggest competitor? Is it the private sector, or are they leaving for other counties or?
Well, one is our own county, because they took a couple different contracts with public defense between our county and DCFS. The other is leaving for a firm that basically it's started by some former prosecutors, and that's who they're looking at. Our competitors to actually get people to come in and be prosecutors are all the other counties. The problem is there's a very small pool of attorneys, and then even a smaller pool of people who want to be prosecutors. believe in my law school class of 100, there's maybe 3 of us who are prosecutors.
Is it because of the pay?
Pay's part of it. It's also, it's kind of the same, it's a tough job. It's kind of the same thing you're dealing with cops. You're working in the law enforcement role, and that just hasn't been a popular profession for the past 10 years or so. And when you go into law school, one, there's money out there for the private practice, and then there's I guess I'd say a stigma in that field about prosecutors and law enforcement. Maybe some of the people drawn to the law don't have that mindset or that worldview that is beneficial. But not only do we compete against the private sector that makes significantly more, but then the other counties that have much bigger offices than ours, and they've kind of had to. Some of them are down quite a few, and they've kind of had to start throwing money out there to even stay afloat. And so there's and everything we talked about in the last meeting with the changes in the legal market. Our prosecutor that just left, he's working for a Salt Lake firm, but he's able to stay up here, work remotely. And so that's just a change it's really changed the legal community with that ability. Any other questions about? Thank you.
Do you think this is sufficient then?
So I have had conversations with 2 prospective applicants after I talked to Amy yesterday, and this gets them in the range that they feel comfortable. With what we had proposed before, they weren't interested at all in applying. So just going off of 2 people who are working in the Salt Lake area, this gets them at least interested, and hopefully if they're interested, maybe others will be interested as they apply. Yeah, that's all. That's as much as I can tell you. I think this gets us closer to being competitive. It's even harder now that if you're asking someone, the reality is we don't have people in the valley who are going to be applying for these jobs. So whoever it is going to have to relocate, and it's not cheaper to live in Cache County anymore. That used to be a draw, especially if someone's locked into a mortgage somewhere. It almost becomes impossible for them to move. Rent here is expensive, so it's hard to come for a pay cut knowing that your cost of living is not going to go down at all.
Thanks, Dave.
So Dane and I worked on this, and we looked at a couple of different things that we could do. One of the things that I'm showing up here on the screen is making that competitive objective, and I've circled it in red. Instead of the midpoint being at a 0, it's at a 10%, which is taking the information that we have and saying, okay, we need to be a little bit more competitive than what this information is giving us. So by increasing that by 10%, it adjusts that pay range so that we can be more competitive. So we can see that an attorney 1 would be starting at $104,696. On the plan that was presented 2 weeks ago, that was about $10,000 less. So this is being more competitive with those on the Wasatch Front. The other thing that we're finding as well is that attorneys can work from home. Did you know that? So they may be getting a job on the Wasatch Front and be able to work from home right here in Cache Valley, not even having to sell their home or relocate, and have to drive into the valley, into Salt Lake maybe once a week or something. So that's the other thing that we're competing against is that. So it's not that you have to drive to your job anymore. It's that you could sit right here and do it. So this helps to get us where we need to be. The increase to this pay plan would be 36%, which sounds like a really big increase, which it is. But the dollar amount is $395,000. With benefits, it would be $515,000. And in talking with Dane, it sounds like we need to look at really making this adjustment effective immediately. If we were to make it effective yesterday so that it would be in effect for this pay period, through the end of the year, the approximate cost would be about $80,000 with benefits. So to keep people, I think that that's something that we seriously should be looking at and considering as we go forward. Any questions on the attorney's pay?
If I can add, not just to keep people, but to find someone to get through the door and start onboarding. That's another reason that we're asking in the next. I'm working with Amy and with finance to get that proposed in the next budget opening, and that understanding that that's going to be less than that because it's going to be in the future at some point. But I think to get someone in the door, we legitimately need that before the next year, unfortunately.
Okay, on to elected officials' wages. Mikey, if you want to just hand those down. I did make a copy of this slide for you so that, because there are so many numbers up on that screen, it may be hard to keep them all straight. Let me explain this slide to you. So each elected official position is listed there across the top. I've listed first, second, and third class counties. However, Salt Lake County has a strike through all of their numbers because we don't compare to them, but I felt like it was an interesting fact for you to see what a first class county is paying versus the second and third class counties, so that's there for your information. Also, the yellow box is going to be the lowest number in that category, and that blue box is going to be the highest, just so that you can grab those pretty quick. Then I took what that average salary was for each of those positions based off of those numbers, not including Salt Lake County in those numbers, and that's where we end up with those red numbers as your average salary. Right below that, where it says cash in that turquoisey blue color, that's what our elected officials are currently being paid. And then historically, we've done a recommended increase of 6%, we've done an increase based on what the employees will be getting, an average of what they'll be getting. This year it would be approximately that 6%. And so I did the calculations for you so that you could see what that would look like if you were to choose to do something similar, and what those rates would go up to. So that's where that recommended increase is, right underneath cash. In the yellow box along the bottom, this is the increase that would be needed to get that elected official's position up to the average of the second and the third class county. So you can see that we are falling behind on that average, and even on the lower end of some of those others. So you can also see that to bring everyone up to the average would cost about $500,000. Which is a big chunk of money as well. So those are the facts for you to consider as you make your decision. You do have that copy for you to review. And if you have any questions as you're looking through that, feel free to reach out either through email or give me a call, or even stop by my office. I'd be happy to explain any of that to you or help you to understand it a little bit better. Are there any questions on that right now?
Maybe that 508,000 is to bring us up to the average. Did you, with this 6% raise, what's the total on that?
So it would be, it would be the difference between the $1,042,000 and the 984. So it's about 60,000. I think it was 58 and some change, if I remember. Also in your packet that I just gave you is the salary for the clerk and auditor if we were to separate those. These are based off of those same numbers. It just was too long to put all on one sheet, so you got this separate. We can see that there's a few of the combined offices. Uinta, Washington, and Weber still have that as a combined office. The others have separated it out. And there you can see what those salaries are for each of those elected positions. Again, you have the average salary there in red. You have what Cache County is paying for the clerk auditor in the blue. And then the recommended increase, that would be what that 6% increase is, the 112. Any questions on that? Okay. Last council meeting, you asked what it would look like with the reorganization of the finance with an elected auditor. So I went ahead and ran some numbers for you. We can see in 2023 that the cost for that office is $571,749. In 2024, assuming that there's a 5% increase and not having a finance director or an assistant finance director, but adding the financial administrative supervisor and taking into account a quarter of the wage of the clerk auditor that would be allocated to the finance division, we would end up with a savings of and the total there would be $515,883. The savings is $55,000. And then in 2025, forecasting with a 3% increase and assuming that there would be an elected position as an auditor in that over that finance division, we can see that the total there would be $597,000, and the difference there would be an additional $81,000. So you have that to consider as well. I maybe should have printed this one off for you. I could certainly email it if that's of interest to you. Yes.
So can you bring the title, the position name to, for instance, Chief Deputy Auditor or whatever who would be over finance? Is that the Finance Assistant Director or what? Comparable?
The Finance Administration Supervisor would be comparable to the Chief Deputy. In talking with our clerk auditor currently, and also in talking with the candidate, they did not want to be a chief deputy because that would be an appointed position and would be serving at the will or grace of the elected officials. So if that elected official were to leave, the chief deputy may or may not have a position going forward. And for continuity, especially in the finance division, I think it's important that we have someone that has a career set and eyes set on a career to stay here through multiple elected officials to be able to keep us going where we need to. So
Looking at that salary versus the finance director, who we had quite a bit of difference. And are we going to get the comparable understanding or knowledge with that salary?
yes, I believe we will. We have made an offer and she has accepted. We'll be starting on November 20th. So the difference is, as we look at the job description, the finance director job description, there were a few things that actually were outdated that no longer were being done by the finance director that had been moved to the tax administration. And also what the auditor would be doing versus what the finance administration supervisor would be doing. So there's a new job description that was put together and a new job value that was put together for that finance administration supervisor.
Was that finance director one of those three dots that was above the blue line on your comparison before?
No, was not.
Really?
This is wages only. Yep. I'll email this to you so that you have it and you can really sit down and digest it. Another thing that has been brought to our attention that the compensation committee looked into was our pager pay and our on-call pay. Currently, we're paying $1.75 an hour for on-call pay, and what's been recommended is that we pay 1/12 of the hourly rate that the employee receives per hour for that on-call pay. So, for example, if the current rate is $24 per hour, the on-call rate would be $2 per hour. If their current rate is $28 per hour, the on-call rate would be $2.33 per hour. This takes into consideration the knowledge and experience of the person that's being on call and encourages them to want to take those on-call shifts as well, rather than just maybe the newbies taking those on-call shifts.
So am I correct that somebody that's on call has to be within certain locale or time response?
That would be up to the department head and what they need to do. Chief Hammer could probably speak to that a little bit more.
Sorry, I missed the question.
So if I'm on call, I can't be on call here from Cache County and be dibbling in Salt Lake City. I gotta be within a certain range, is that correct?
That's correct. You usually have to be within the zone of your response area.
Okay, that helps, because it keeps you local.
Right.
Thank you. Also, what this does is this helps to keep the pager pay in line with what a market adjustment would be doing, because it's based on what the employee's pay is, not necessarily just a flat rate for everyone. And so as they're receiving those market and merit adjustments, that pager pay would be increasing for that person as well. Just this last week, I talked with Logan City. They actually raised their pager pay to $3 an hour. So this is not out of line and actually maybe a little bit low as we're looking at that. So
Just related to that, our Mendon paid on call times paid on call from 5 o'clock at night till 8 o'clock in the morning. We've shut that department down 39 times this year because there wasn't anybody that wanted to be on pager pay. They'd rather go do whatever it is they want to do. So that ambulance essentially is out of service for that period.
So would this increase interest on that?
I think it would help, yeah. I mean, it's not a ton of money, but if they recognize that we recognize their dedication and we show that there's a plan and there's a potential increase over time. We have people, some have done over 2,000 hours this year so far of pager pay. The average is about 1,200 hours. So it can add up over time, but it gets to be a burden too, because when you're on pager pay, doesn't matter what you're doing, you can be barbecuing with a family and the pager goes off. It's, hope the burgers don't burn, we're out, so.
So question, of those 39 times you were without anybody, did any call happen during those 39 times?
Yes.
That's the bad
So,
part.
so that's the bad part, and it's just response time's longer. So the ambulance had to come out of Wellsville to cover Mandan at that time.
all right, on to insurance. So we are with Motive Health, and they came back with a renewal of 13% to start with. And we worked with our brokers and said that just won't do. And they were able to come down to 6.7% for the increase. The reason for those big of increases is, first of all, our plan is running a little bit high to start with, right? And second of all, healthcare increases have gone up just as much as everything else throughout. And so we're being charged, well, the insurance is being charged more, or their contracts are going up and they have to pass that cost along as well. So the increase in dollar amount is $290,798. Also, the federal government is changing the deductibles for high deductible health plans. And so it's going to up $100 for a single from $1,500 to $1,600. And for a family, instead of $3,000, it's going up to $3,200. So with that, we would need to increase our health savings account contribution, because the county does contribute 50% of the deductible to the employee's health savings account. So that would be those numbers there, the 800 single, the 1,600 for the family, and the approximate cost on that based off of the enrollment that we have at this time would be $28,100. Now that could change next year if we end up having more families or less singles or vice versa. It just depends on how our enrollment goes for insurance, but that gives you a good guesstimate for where we're at now. Dental, with Dental Select, it came back at a 15% increase, and so we went out to bid to find out what else we could do. We found Dental Guard, which is a product of Guardian Insurance, which is where we have our supplemental accident and hospital indemnity programs. They came back with a negative 5.1%, so that's a savings of $17,264. It is a richer benefit, so they have a $2,000 annual max, where the plan with Dental Select is a $1,500 annual max. That may not mean a lot to you until you have to have a lot of dental work done or have a child that needs to have their wisdom teeth out like I did this year. And if we would have had that $2,000 annual max, I wouldn't have had to have anything out of my pocket because it would have been covered. With the $1,500 annual max for my daughter's wisdom teeth to be out, I still had to pay $400 out of pocket because we'd already met the max of the dental. So we did look to make sure that we have a similar network of dentists and that there are plenty of dentists that are covered here in Cache Valley. The network looks very similar. We checked everyone in my office and a few others of who their dentist was and made sure that they were on the plan. So we're confident that there shouldn't be much of a hiccup with changing over to that. So with that savings and then with the increase, we're looking at a total increase of $301,634. That includes that HSA contribution as well. So the other thing that the compensation committee is recommending is a 401k consideration or contribution consideration. You'll remember, for those of you that have been on the council for a while, and maybe this actually predates you, but prior to 2011, Cache County contributed 4.8% to the 401k for all public employees to equalize the disparity between the public employees and the public safety retirement plan. In 2011, there was a hiccup in the economy, and it was decided by the council that 401k contributions would be discontinued and given to the employees as an hourly wage increase, hoping to bring the employees closer to market rates. Well, we can see that we're always chasing the market, and so that maybe wasn't a long-term fix issue, but a short-term. And so since 2011, so well over 12 years, the Cache County has not given a contribution to the 401k. And so the compensation committee is recommending that we consider a matching recommendation or a match where the employer would contribute 50 cents for every dollar that the employee contributes, up to a maximum of 3%. Is what the county would be. So if the employee contributes 2% of their gross wages, the employer would contribute 1%. And you can see those different examples there. Now, the very bottom one is important to see because this shows you what that max is. The employee contributes 7% of their gross wages. The employer still contributes 3%. They could contribute 10%. The employer still contributes 3%. So, something to take into consideration. As I participated in these different surveys, one came back from Salt Lake County that talked about a 401k match. All of the entities have been redacted and they won't tell me who they are, but half of those people that answered this question are doing this type of a match, but you can see that every single one of them is doing some type of contribution. So that's well over 10 entities that answered this. And so it's not uncommon for this to be done. And it is a great retention tool and a great recruiting tool as well. We have had people who have turned down jobs because we don't do a 401k match, and their company was doing one, and that was really important to them.
That more so from private to the public sector?
Both, actually, because there are public sectors that do those were all public sectors that I showed you, and there are public sectors that are doing that 401k contribution as well. So you're probably wondering what the risk is. This is a really hard one to determine because it would matter how much the employee is putting in and what the county would need to be matching. So we took what the maximum risk could be, right, so that we could help you make your decision. If we were to do a 401k match for all employees, it would be $750,000 annually. That would be the most. Now keep in mind that right now, well, a year ago, let me back up. A year ago, we had 33% of our employees that contributed to a 401k. Then last year, we put into policy that all new employees would be auto-enrolled into the 401k, and they would have the option to unenroll, but they had to go into the website and unenroll. So now our participation is up to 50%. So 50% of our employees are participating into the 401k. Of those new employees that have put in, there were 50 new employees last year that were eligible for 401k, and 6 of those decided not to, or to unenroll. So you can see that the majority of them are staying in, which is really good. We want them to be saving for retirement. And so we may or may not have all of our employees that participate in this. I would say we would probably have a little bit more than what we do now participate in it. But if we were to have everyone that was eligible participate in a 401k, I would be extremely surprised and maybe even buy you all donuts. I don't know. So if we were to say, you know what, we recognize that there's a disparity between the public safety and the public employee retirement system, and we just wanted to do a 401k contribution for public employees, the cost, the maximum cost that could be, it would be $429,000 annually. And then if we decided that the Tier 2 public employees retirement system really was the one that was lacking, and we just decided to do a contribution for Tier 2 public employees only, that would be about $300,000. So something for you to consider there. So to wrap it up of what we've talked about, and then we can have discussion or take any questions because we do have a few minutes. The market adjustment minus the sheriff and the attorney would be about a 6% overall increase to the budget. The attorney would be a 36% increase, the sheriff would be a 13.5% increase. So we can see there on the left-hand side, total wage increases, excluding any electeds, would be $3.2 million. The elected official salaries, I've given you that information so that you can make your best decisions. And so that would be up to you. I wasn't sure exactly where you wanted to go in order to put that number in there. And then the 401k contribution options, I've given you the 3 options that were recommended by the compensation committee. I did, just for illustration's sakes, I decided to put in the wrong number. I can see that right now. That should be $730,000, not $750,000. But that's where that is sitting with all of that. So with insurance renewals, a 401k contribution, and then wage increases that does not include elected officials, it looks like you'd be about $4.2 million is where we would be. Are there any questions or any discussion? Or do you want me to go back to any of the slides?
I'll just comment. Going either way. We're already having to pull money out of our rainy day fund just to meet the budget that we have already in place. And we have to pull another $4 or $5 million out to cover this. And I think that we don't have any choice at this time, but we're going to have to raise taxes to cover this.
Can't do it.
I mean, we can't this time,
Yeah.
this year.
Can't do it.
But, I mean, there's no other way to pay for this. I understand that there is a lot of, we are working hard to try and have the employees we need and retain the employees we need. And as somebody who worked in the private sector his whole life, we retired on what we saved in our 401k, and that was it, period. We didn't have state retirement system, other things to fall back on. So I keep wondering why it is we're including a 401k as well as a state retirement system. Adding to that, where people in the private sector don't have pensions, they don't have that kind of money to work with. My brother retired, he was the state or the county surveyor, and he retired and he told me how much he was going to be getting. I just did a present value calculation on what he would be getting and how much I would need to have saved in order to have that same benefit. And I said, you realize you're a millionaire? Because for somebody else in the private sector to get your same benefit every month, they'd have to have $1 million saved in order to be
a state retirement too?
What's
Sorry,
that?
our employees get a state
Yeah.
retirement?
Oh.
Okay, I didn't know.
The URS is changed. It's
It has
now
changed.
not like what my dad had back in the day. It's a significantly lower benefit than it used to be.
Yeah, your brother was on Tier 1. In 2011, they changed the URS system, and if you hadn't been employed before then you were on the Tier 2, which is not as rich of a benefit.
That is huge. That's a huge change.
It's a big
It is.
change.
It is a big change.
But anyway, the bottom line is, it's simply, we have two choices.
Yeah.
We cut expenses or we raise taxes. I mean, that's
Or we
just,
do a little bit of both.
just the way it is, yeah.
So what do you do at home?
Well, since I'm on a
Cut
fixed
expenses,
income,
or who do you raise
I cut
taxes on?
expenses.
Okay, that's right.
I don't have any choice.
And with the budget the way it is right now, we're gonna have to find some way to cut some expenses someplace.
Yeah.
Amy, can I ask a question? And you're gonna hate it.
Okay, thanks for letting me know.
You may not be alone in asking this question, by the way. Go ahead. I don't know what it is, but
I mean, this, and I agree, our employees are our most greatest people, but I would be interested in comparing, just like you did on counties, staffing. I just wonder if there's some places that have more people that we might could cut out, because just as Carl said, we're damned if we do, damned if we don't. And so it's gonna have to be a combination of both, raise taxes, but I'm also looking at the point of saying, okay, there's gotta be some trimming somewhere. I'm really not apt to want to trim services, and so I'm cautious of the attorneys and stuff like that, but when I look at certain departments, have you got any feel that, I mean, I understand most people are saying they're staffed and overworked, but is there anywhere we could start looking? And I'm just sitting here saying, okay, have we compared that from a manpower standpoint? Does that make sense?
We compared it a few years ago, and we actually are running pretty lean. I could do a comparison again, but we don't have counties that are exactly the same.
Right.
So what we may call development services and what's encompassed in that would be called something different in a different county. Even Box Elder County calls it something different and staffs it a little bit different. So it's not always apples to apples that we're comparing to. I think the really good question would be to have heart-to-hearts with department heads and find out exactly what their staffing is looking like, what their needs are. But also, as you're looking at that budget, really look at what new positions have been added to the budget this year that they're asking for.
Well, not only that, that you look at this as an encompassing thing. You say to the department, okay, 5% cut or 6% cut, where do you want to start? Is it on people? Is it on supplies? What? Because I'm sitting here looking at this increase of 6% or whatever else, and I'm in the private sector, and I'm not seeing 6% increase in the private sector. So, and yet I'm going to go to the citizens and say, okay, we're substantiating this 6% increase with the tax rate increase, and that's going to impact them heavily. So that's why I'm saying there's got to be some thinking outside the box and some not so fun things to make this all happen, is the way I see it.
When we're recruiting, we do try to think outside of the box and really try to portray the great things that Cache County has and the extra things that we have. However, when you're a new applicant and you're comparing a job, you're looking at the money and the dollars. And so for us to be able to recruit, we need to be able to have pay ranges that are competitive in order to draw applicants to apply for our jobs.
Dane, not having the employees you need, what kind, you mentioned, people are having a heavier workload, but what does that do with the general attitude in the office and how people are feeling about things?
So And I know I've presented a couple times this year of just what our caseload has done over the last few years. So in our office, when you say, so right now we're missing one special victims attorney, and one general felony attorney. So either one of those that puts hundreds of cases onto another attorney that they have to cover, or someone has to cover it. That's a lot of stress because that's, say, a special victims caseload, carry around 100, between 100 and 125 of those cases. That's 100 to 125 victims.
And how many hours are, for one victim?
It kind of
Can't
depends on
even-
the
yeah,
case.
yeah.
Sometimes I can tell you that the attorneys, especially on that caseload, it's not a 40-hour week ever. It's always a lot more. And so when you add that, somewhere things start to break down. Whether it's their personal lives or how we handle cases, there's just not enough hours in the day to do everything. And if you're doing everything at 100% in your job, then your personal life suffers, which you start taking that into consideration. Can I stay here? I never see my kids, I never see my family. Or if you try to maintain that balance, then your work starts suffering, and that's real people's lives. So one thing, and I talked about this last time, one thing we're doing to try to, we've ended the Logan City municipal prosecution contract, which will bring another attorney into our office. That does decrease our revenue a little bit next year, but frankly, having that extra attorney, especially with the turnover and never knowing when we're going to have a whole position that we have to have filled, and having a position we can't really fill until the next election, because so we've been down a position for the last year already. It's tough. I know people are stressed.
Why can't we fill a position until the next election?
Well, so currently I'm filling an interim role. So I still have a merit position. So if I wasn't reelected, I'd still have a position with the county. So if we hired someone and someone contests the election, or I decide not to run, and we'd hired someone would have to be let go, and I don't feel like that's fair until we have some. It's not fair to bring an employee in. I don't think we'd get an employee to come in saying, well, your position's, there's potential, it's only for a year. So we've left that open because we'd be hiring someone with the potential that they wouldn't be working here in a year. If we don't know what the future is, it'd be presumptuous of me to say that. So it's been empty.
Okay. Thank you, Dane. I'm going to speak from personal experience, and this is tough. And I can remember when I retired, and I worked for a bank, but they were cutting back staff. I was finding myself staying at my position until 10 or 11 o'clock at night just to get the daily work done. And that really took a toll on how I felt about my job and how I felt about, just being there. And so I just really think we need to pay our people for what we expect them to do. Will it ever be equal? No matter what we pay some people, sometimes they're still going to put in more hours than what, is asked of them to do. But we really need to take a good hard look and think of what our county needs in the way of security, in the way of prosecutions, in the way of our police work. And we all know it's not getting to be a better world out there. And if we need to have that protection, then we need to step up and pay what needs to be paid. That's my opinion.
I don't disagree on that front at all. All I'm saying is, we have to find a way to pay for it.
Yes, and I agree too, and this budget, you and I have talked, we visited with Micah, I was with Catherine today and Micah, and there are areas that we can take a really good hard look at, and look at not doing away, but cutting some expenses, either that or raise our revenue, and so we've got to take a really good hard look at all of that.
Thanks, Barbara. I think we came to that conclusion today as we were looking at this. It's not sustainable to come and dip into our reserves.
Yeah,
Something's got to give.
right.
Yeah, I mean, just raising, and I don't know that we have a lot of choice, but just raising the salaries the way that they were presented to us, again, it's gonna cut into our reserves another $4 million.
Yeah, and if I could give some outside the county, I'm a decision maker at another institution that we're trying to make these same kinds of decisions of what to do with wages, and where a mortgage now is 8.25. I mean, that we have to provide living wages for the people that work here, and so those are hard decisions that we're making in both fronts. If he's going to attract an attorney to come here that's locked in at a mortgage rate of 3%, to come here and to buy a home now at 8.25, that's and to take a pay cut to do it, that's not realistic. That's not something that we can fulfill. So these are real conversations that we're having in multiple sectors, here and there, and it's like we said today in our meeting. We've got to be sustainable. Can't just keep dipping into our reserves. But we have to make these decisions to think of the people that are going to be working for us as well.
So what's the answer?
Well,
Sandy's got the answer.
I've got it.
if you sit and look at what Social Security gave as a COLA raise, what was that? And then, so you look at our retired
was it?
people, it was 2.2, wasn't it? 2.2 was a COLA for Social Security
In 2023?
for 2024.
What was it for 2023?
It was the largest it ever was. It was 3.8.
3, yeah.
0.8 or something, yeah.
So that's why, just like Barbara said, we got to cut somewhere. We probably got a tax raise, but I really feel for those who are retired and sitting on Social Security when they only get a 2.2. So there's, what's the answer? It's going to be a combination of, holy cow, what can we do? I agree, we need to pay our employees, but
We've just got to look at some other places to make up for it.
right.
I agree. I think a combination of both. I mean, I am a very fiscal conservative. I think low taxes is our goal, lowest that we can do, but everyone knows that everything has exploded in the last couple of years. I don't know how many years it's been since Cache County raised their tax rate or raised their revenue, which can be done a couple of different ways, but I think if we're doing our best to lean up the budget the best that we can, people are going to understand that there has to be an increase in revenue with the way the world is right now, the way things have gone. Everything costs everybody more, and that just makes sense. That's if we can do both somehow.
Dave, you look like you've been pontificating a great deal here, this whole discussion.
Enlighten us, leader.
No, I'm listening. And it is, I'll be blunt, we have a lot of fluff. And I will say, not necessarily needs, desires and wants but in several budgets. And a lot of things that have no determination as to what specific expense they are to go for. They're just kind of there, just in case. And that's what we got to get rid of within the departments. I mean, we're at the bare bones of, hey, this has got to be an exact need. This is what we, in order to keep paying, which I agree with you, that's one of our highest priorities. You got to keep the people. Without the people, nothing gets done. And the other thing is that's within those so within the departments, to keep the people within the departments, we got to say, okay, what can we literally do without? You know, do we need to remodel a new office because I'm new or something? Do we need to change something? Or you know what? I don't think the next couple of years is the time to do much remodeling of anything. I don't think that's where the money should go if it's more important to keep the people. Flat out, you know, but when I hear some of these little things like that, I go, apparently it's, to some people, it's not as important to keep their people working as it is to have some nice things around them. The other thing is I'm kind of a little bit on the timing of all this. We were clear to October 24th in receiving this information. In the past, and maybe we've got it late, but in the past, the health information, the cost of health care, all that kind of, we used to have that. We're talking way into June, you know, June and July. I remember sitting on the compensation committee several years ago, and we were negotiating that in April and May, what it would be. And we'd get a strong estimate, and we had a strong estimate, and finally that 1st September, we really got the exact numbers. Okay, but we had them early on. And then all of a sudden, all these raises and cost of living, all that, bang, October 24th. We need to have that a long time ago so that we can really have better direction, because you know, we made a decision that we weren't going to raise taxes. So our only way to cover some of this stuff is to jump into the rainy day fund, you know, our general fund. With maybe some of that other information, if we'd had it earlier on some of it, we'd probably maybe, you know, inched or asked for a slight raise or something in taxes, just kind of balance some things out. So now we've got some big choices, and that will be it, that we've got to dig deeper. I think there are several positions that I don't think are necessary. I think they are nice. I think they are helpful in some things, but they flat out, to me, are not necessary. So we may have to make some changes that way. I think there is overload in working in some areas that it's just the actions of the people have brought that overload onto the attorney's office. The actions, again, of the people have pushed that increase of need and everything there. The sheriff's office, again, the actions of the people. And I don't know, I think those actions may, from what I'm seeing and hearing, maybe some of those illegal activities seem to be a little bit on the increase, which is scaring me that we might have to have more personnel in the future to maintain the same safety level. So, I guess as we really look into, you know, all these meetings that we're having and stuff, we're going to have to really dig deep. But now we need to take these numbers, now we need to blend them and put them in with our other, I thought these numbers should have all been in with that tentative budget that we had received from the executive. They should have been all part of it. We should have had one package, and it wasn't. And so to me, that tentative budget that we got from our executive, to me, doesn't hold a lot of value to it. I thought we'd have a better one. I'm being blunt with that one. But, so now we've got to pull all those numbers together, see how this is affected, and to make it all balanced now. So that's going to be tough, so go ahead.
As a question, we're already using $4 million from fund balance. We talked about this today for, you know, from the general fund. If we were to adopt these changes that have been presented today, that would be an additional 3.5 minutes. We would be using $7.5 million from our fund balance just to have a balanced budget for this year. for the proposed budget.
That's right. Yeah. See, that's not included in that.
That's a lot of money.
So, okay, anyway, that's what I wish we'd had that information earlier on, that we could have been making some decisions. And there's probably reasons for it, and we're past 4 o'clock. We have another presentation, but we have got some big decisions to make, and we're just gonna have to dig deeper and just, there might be a lot of conventions and a lot of things like that we're just gonna have to say, not for 2024, not for 2024, and just, and hold to it. So-
Because as we go through, we can go through this budget and try and make cuts with this much knowledge about each department. You know, what we see on the paper, could we ask each department head to look at their own budget that they've presented and come up with a 3% or a 5% or some percentage reduction? What would they do to reduce their own department, rather than us trying to figure that out? And then we can still take that as a recommendation, but to me, that would, they just have that more knowledge. Like, how could I reduce my department to help the county budget? Is that even feasible? I don't know if that's even a good idea. It's just a thought that came to me.
I think it's a worthy ask.
Probably the only.
Could I add to that?
Yeah.
Every other place I've been did exactly that, where they had a goal, or they asked for, what would you do on a 1%? What would you do on a 3%? And asked the department heads to rank where they would make the cuts. That way, you're getting input from the department heads. Also, it's spread across all departments, instead of targeting perhaps things in a different way. But that also gives a chance for the department heads, who are the professionals and know their department's the best, to give, you know, their input. And they prioritize it, right? To say, this is, and then it also gives them a chance to say, if this is cut, this is what the outcome would be. That way, you know, as a council, you can say,
And
kinda judge.
and how it affects services.
Yes, exactly, yeah. And that gives you a chance to, you know, agree or disagree with some of their conclusions, or say, I realize you ranked this first as your first cut, but we think maybe your third option might affect things less, you know, anyway. But it does give you a lens to look through from the department head's point of view, and that's super helpful.
I think that's a good idea.
I think that's probably the only.
I don't know if we have time.
No,
It's,
no.
we're just so crunched on time, but
Yeah.
that'll help us, because we're gonna try and cut the budget anyway.
Micah?
Yeah, I think a request like that would probably, that's not a request I think the council needs to make. You don't need to pass a resolution saying that. I think if the council wants to do that, I can send an email to department heads tomorrow.
Awesome.
And point being is that probably more time the better, because we're running.
Do you want, how would you like that stated? What, because it's, you know, what will a 1% really,
Dirk's idea, Dirk, if I'm right, so he's saying, what, if we mandated a 1% cut, what would you cut? If we mandated a 3% cut, what would you cut? If we mandated a 5% cut, so.
But let's look at this, we're talking 7.5 million on a budget of what, 111 million? So if you divide that out, I'm in the 5% range,
Yeah.
at least. So, 1% doesn't
Yeah,
go
I don't even,
I will say there's two things I don't think we need to I don't think a 7%, a $7.5 million use of fund balance is inevitable, because two things. First, Catherine, Barbara, and I discussed this morning. When the executive's office and finance department put this budget together, they are liberal on their, I can make sure I get it right, liberal on the expenditures and conservative on the revenues. And so it's very likely, very likely that in reality, we won't draw that much from fund balance.
Phil said that in meeting 2 weeks ago, or a
That's
month
what Phil
ago.
said, yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing to remember, and this only applies to general fund, is we're actually over the limit for the general fund by about $1 million.
Dealers.
And so there's gonna need to be some use of fund balance from general fund. So two things to keep in mind, it's not a $7.5 million deficit that we're fighting. It's a little smaller than that, but it is significant.
Thank you, Michael.
So do you want to say 3% and 5, or just 3, or what, how do we want, what direction should we give the department heads?
Well, I would, because the future is uncertain, the budget may be conservatively pulled together. I'd say 5%. 5% is $5 million.
And as was mentioned, there's a lot of fluff in here. If we can get rid of some of the fluff, maybe it's not gonna be the 5%, but we should probably shoot for, I'm gonna say 3 to 5%.
Do a 3% and a 5%.
Yeah.
Will you send that out then?
That'd be awesome.
That would be great.
Thank you.
Does that work out? Everyone?
Either way, if you ask for 5% and ask them to prioritize, at some point, there's like a dashed line at 3%, right? So it might cross right in the middle of one of their cuts, right? But at least that way, asking for the larger one, you can't get to 5% unless you ask for it, right? So.
That's true. You don't want them to go through all the trouble of finding the 3% and then having to go back and just do it once at 5.
Yeah, but the fear is, there's gonna be cuts. So,
Can I ask just one clarification for the council? Should I assume, should the department heads assume that this is with the tentative budget as is and the compensation committee recommendations? So they get that, but then they also have to.
I would say yes.
Yes.
With the current proposals on the compensation committee, what you presented today, if that was to go into effect in full, if that was added, how this would all then blend together, where we could cut to actually minimize the I guess I won't call it the damage, but the need.
The deficit.
Well, a 5% cut just basically covers the compensation committee's
compensation.
recommendations.
Thank you.
That's all it does.
Okay,
Okay.
I appreciate that. Amy, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay,
you.
next one,
Where I stand for it?
clerk auditor.
Oh, that presentation.
Well, I was going to start,
You're gonna start out with what you're cutting?
I'm here, Diana Schaefer's here to assist me if we have any questions that I can't answer, so please feel free to direct those to her directly if you'd like to. I'm here for two reasons. One is to review an opening to the 2023 budget. We have some items that we need to correct in there for your consideration. And the second is for budget amendments to the 2024 budget. I was going to start by apologizing for being so late and having these ready for you, but now, after Sandy's remarks, I feel like I'm ahead of the curve because we have a bit of a silver lining for the 2024 budget. In 3 of the 4 areas that accounting areas that I'm responsible, you'll see that we have a savings after tonight that we're asking for of just around $100,000 in our budgets alone. So hopefully we're getting close to that 3 or 5% already. I'd like to start off by saying I've got 2 approaches to budgeting. And with all budgets, I like to be accurate and I like to be conservative. I come from the private sector, which means that we ran out of money. We had to do better in order to continue to provide services. Doing better means a lot of different things. It means cutting costs. It means increasing customer base, increasing customer satisfaction. But I applaud you for the ideas of how to cut back on some of the expenses that we have. And if we have time, I might have some ideas relevant to my 2 departments that I've been doing already that might be helpful for the entire county. Since we are a little bit short on time, I'm going to ask you to just review those 2 pages that Diana just handed out and see if you have any questions. I hope it's okay. I'll just combine my 2 15-minute blocks into the remainder of the time. And
2023.
yep.
Yeah.
For 2023, what we're doing here is we are, as you can see on the comments on the far right-hand side of the sheet, we are mostly covering actual costs, making up for some budget shortfalls that I inherited, so restoring the budget in many areas. We had to reclassify some expenses as well. So as you go down this list, you'll see that, for example, if you go down to the clerk line, 4142-115, for overtime, our budget for this year was 0, and so we had to modify the 2023 budget in order to cover some actual costs that we had earlier this year. You'll see the same thing there for part-time and seasonal employees, where for some reason nothing was budgeted in the clerk's office for those areas, but there were obvious expenses. So we're trying to get 2023 back on track.
Are those election employees mostly, the part-time and seasonal?
These are in the clerk's office. If you go down, you'll see that we also have elections employees as well.
And then I'd like to make a note on the yellow highlighting. You see that's a change that happened since we submitted this electronically to Micah. Because another pay period hit on the overtime and another Les Olson quarterly came, and that was another one. You see restored budget in the audit. For tax admin, Jeff's had moved like 30,000 of it. And I think Dave was pretty aware of how bad that budget was massacred. And so that is the only place that we're asking for fund balance, is to restore that audit budget. In the other budgets, we used existing money to balance that.
So not asking for any additional funds, just pulling them from other areas within the same. Not even, most of the time, not even crossing the two departments, but keeping the clerk's budget within the clerk area, the auditor's budget within the auditor's budget.
That's an absolute.
As much as we can.
I'm sorry, help me to understand, part-time employees and seasonal employees, and I know you can't answer for what was done before, but what were these employees doing? Now, Sandy asked about elections, so what was this for?
You're correct. I can't answer some of that question. But I can tell you what we do use those employees for now.
Okay.
Full-time employees are there to provide 8 to 5 coverage in the clerks and other offices for internal and external customers. We need people there when someone comes in for a marriage license or a department head comes over to ask for help from the auditor's office for finance. Part-time employees are wonderful because we use them to cover the gaps between the full-time employees, and they love to work in the clerk's office, and they're willing to do so without benefits because it fits into their flexible schedule. Seasonal employees, the only reason I can see that we need seasonal employees are in the elections area, and that's just for when we have elections. We really don't need seasonal employees at any other time that I can see. I believe they may have been used in the past for other areas. I can address that in a moment. But as far as elections go, when we actually have a primary or general election, we do need a little extra staff, and so we do hire some seasonal help to do that. But we're getting better at that. We've actually cut our seasonal cost back in the primary election, and for this general election, we will probably not hire as many seasonal employees as we were anticipating, because we've got well-trained full and part-time employees who can jump in and take care of that.
If I can add to that, so in the 2023, you kind of had to fix how Jess was running the office, which was a lot of seasonals, coming and going at will, and so.
Odd schedules.
So he's restructured it, and if you look at his clerk budget for the 2024 year, he has eliminated the seasonal, because he can cover it with part-time, and that also gives better coverage for the public.
And again, just so I know, reiterate, part-time employees do not receive benefits.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Another thing I might note just happens to be in the clerk areas as well. On line 4142-740, capitalized equipment, there was 0 budget in there for a $10,000 expense to do historic preservation. I think to the chair's comments earlier, this may not be the time to do some of these optional projects, And you'll see in our 2024 budget that we do not have any of those optional projects that cost taxpayer money.
What was done in 2023 that cost $10,000?
We preserved 5 books at around $2,000 each, 5 of her historic records.
Also, in the 740 in the election budget, you can see that there was some flooring that was also taken out of the zero budget.
About $15,000.
That election, yeah, the ballot center. And that award, none of that was in the budget, but some people don't believe in staying within earmarked funds.
Say that again.
Some people don't believe in staying within earmarked funds.
No, I'm
or
just,
the other part about
no,
it.
go back to,
So if you look down at the very last
Very last line.
department, which is elections, you'll see the 740 capitalized equipment, we're asking for $15,148.07 to cover the ballot center flooring. There was zero budget and it got spent anyway, and that was not during Dave's tenure.
So a little bit of cleanup. It was to finish up some of the work that was done in the ballot center up by the airport. And there was an epoxy flooring that was put down, so that would be long lasting. And it is a nice floor, I have to say. Last comment I might make.
spent and there was no
Zero
money.
budget for it, correct?
Last item I might mention is at the top of that 2023 budget amendment, and this is for some part-time employees on line 120, General Ledger 4132, line 120. We are increasing the part-time staff. This is to help cover some of the extra work that's going on with garbage collection. That's a new responsibility of the county that the auditor's office has taken over. And we've needed to have 2 of our actual part-time clerks put in some effort in the auditor's office in order to help them out. And that's going very well. In fact, our goal is to be completely caught up with all backfill that we need by tomorrow. So we should be able to see those hours dwindling as we go into November.
But help me there, because we were already doing the garbage collection from the county, right? So are we taking on some cities, or what are we doing there?
Well, our first billing is actually the end of this month, and we've been getting a lot of phone calls with citizens asking questions about the new arrangements. And because we've lost some staff, full-time staff, specifically Phil, those other
Well, we should be able to turn that over to Waste Management in a lot of those calls, can we not?
that's not the arrangement that we have with those. For residential, we are actually doing the billing for all the new residential customers within
I
the county.
understand that part, but we were already doing the billing before with Logan City too, right?
Betty had asked us to bring on some extra staff to help us with taking the new phone calls that were coming in to answer all of the questions that were going. They had a backlog of that. And we also had a backlog of scanning and indexing from the finance division. Please. Anyone else who wants?
So with the reorganization, one person, Sandy, who was doing the garbage, moved over to the treasurer's office, and her job is now there. So the finance division is down a person there, plus down with Phil and Cameron both being gone. And so Betty and Brittany were trying to take all of the phone calls and answer all of that, but they weren't able to get all of their jobs done. So they were able to bring people in from the clerk's office to help answer those phone calls so that they could take that off of their plate and be able to focus on what they needed to, so.
Now, there's only a few cities that you're helping out, right?
Sorry?
There's just a few cities that you're actually doing waste management billing,
It's just for the unincorporated counties.
just
Yeah.
unincorporated. Because I was gonna say, it's all the cities said that they were going to take upon their own billing
That's correct.
of everything, so.
And so this 2023 is based on, the spreadsheets that Dave and I looked at were based on the actual expenses and which lines were bleeding in every single department that he oversees. And then also looking at a 6-year history of every single account line as we went through this 2023 and the 2024. This in 2024, we were able to do some substantial cuts that'll go back to fund balance. So he may have already get his 3%, probably not 5%, but.
Good, appreciate that.
Any questions on that 2023? And then
Nope.
Do we like it? Do we,
Yeah, 2024, go ahead.
we can send this to Or no, you'll vote on it on the 7th?
Yeah, it was,
So it'll come to you, okay, good.
2024 is very similar. Fortunately, we're looking forward. Had a chance to sit down with Diana extensively this week and last to go over some of the numbers. Again, I'll just point out some highlights for you. In our budget for 2024, we actually are increasing in two different departments expected expenditures for training. Now, I know that's something that in your previous meeting you mentioned you may want to do, but this is for actual significant training in elections areas and in the auditor's area, and it's for 1 or 2 people at a time, and it is a modest increase over what we've done in the past. This leads to industry certifications that not only benefit the 1 or 2 people that are working towards those certifications, but the training can also be used for everyone else in the office. And so we're really getting a good value with this small increase that we have in training across the different areas.
I think he's.
What line number is that?
This is your first department, line 3, $500 for education and training. And
Okay.
your finance department, and then the very last, 4th department, elections. I believe he put in there first, that is on your 417210.
That's correct.
Sorry, 230 for the CERA certification.
It's actually 210 for that certification, and then 230 for travel. Travel, we've increased a little bit so that we can allow some other members of our election staff to travel to UAC meetings and get the benefit of that networking and interaction with other election officials.
But if you look at the red print, you'll see the reductions that Benson has made to 3 of those budgets.
One other thing I'd like to make a mention of is, as far as employee compensation goes, we've eliminated almost all of the overtime. In fact, we've eliminated overtime completely in the clerk and elections areas. We've also eliminated all seasonal work in the clerk's area, and we've reduced the amount of seasonal work in the elections. Related to that is that we are building up our cadre of election volunteers within the community. We had 4 who were approved by our personnel department to be volunteers for the primary election. We now have 6 who are going to help us with the general election. And what I have found in my short tenure is that those volunteers are very proficient at helping with elections. They're motivated, they're eager, they are competent, and they love to help out with what we're doing, and it represents not only great involvement from our community, but a cost savings to the county.
good.
I realize you haven't had a lot of time to look at 2024, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Talk to me about second item on 2024, professional and technical, the reduction of 25,000. Is that just because you're taking that?
That was the Kate Becker line, and it had been at 20,000. She spent out 30,000 in 2023. They had increased it to 40,000, and Dave made the call that he'll be doing some of that internal auditing in-house rather than needing that bigger budget.
That's what she was charging, was 40?
Well, I'm saying the budget for this year was 20,000. Becker charged us over 30,000. That's why we're out in the 2023, where you can see that we had to add in the audit 10,620. So she charges 30,620 in a $20,000 budget. And that was at $8,000 per contract, or $80 an hour. So someone, but we hadn't worked on the budgets yet, so that must have been finance that increased that budget for 2024 to 40,000, and we were like, we don't need $40,000, so we're giving that back to the
Fund
fund
balance.
balance, except for any portion that we have to use to balance the rest of the budget.
I've actually retained $15,000 worth of budget for 2024 in that line, which is a little higher than I wanted to go.
Which is 5,000 below the
5,000 below the current ballot. But my hope is that in 2024, the auditor will use much of my salary to conduct some of the audits that we had contracted out in the past. We won't be able to do that for everything, That's why we have $15,000 there in case we needed to do some contract and external audit by someone. But I don't anticipate that we'll need nearly as much as we have in the past.
And it's like I told them, we don't have to spend because it's been allocated, that doesn't mean we have to spend it. You know, if we don't spend it at the end of the year, it gets to go back to fund balance. That's the beauty of fund account.
But what you just said there tells me that there was a, I don't know if I better say it.
Oh, yeah, I think you should speak freely, Dave.
Basically, there was a budget for our outside auditor that was hired, right? And we exceeded that, so we went to another account to pay for it. And so it was never transferred
No.
into the account to be paid for that outside auditor, right?
No, so
So-
we're talking about the internal auditor, Becker, correct?
Right. The internal auditor is paid out of an account, all of a sudden we exceeded that, so we just went and paid it out of another account.
Wrong. It got paid out of the 310. It got paid out of 310, so when you looked at
How
when you
could-
looked at your financial statements, it would show you that you were 10,620 over, which you see here in the 2023 budget, because $30,620 was expended out of a $20,000 budget, much like the flooring at the ballot center.
Well,
where there was
that's getting to
zero.
my point. How do you pay for it out of an account that is zeroed? Just go into the negative?
It goes into the negative, and I know
Okay,
that when I was
then
in
basically
accounting-
you would go to a budget opening and transfer it over,
Well, you technically should.
or you just
before
run it
you
into the
spend it.
negative.
Before you spend it. And now, back in the day, when I was an
Well-
accountant for the county, if a request for payment came and we didn't have the money,
Right.
we didn't pay it until it came to the council and was
Yeah.
fixed.
That's how things
But
should be
That's how it
running.
used to work, but
And that's how it
Things
should be
change.
running, and somewhere in the past, we've lost that,
well, since Tamara left.
transparency to do things right.
In 2014, 15, things changed.
So-
Now they're on the up track, I think. Vincent has some really good ideas.
So now with the 2023 budget, we're kind of catching up and doing that opening in arrears instead of in advance.
But I guess what I'm saying, I'm really appreciating the honesty, that we're bringing this out exactly, hey, this is it, rather than try to shoe shine it somehow.
Well, and you'll see.
And now we gotta fix it, we gotta do it right. And that's really what needs to happen across the board.
And so with my format, I kind of went like what I used to do for the council when I worked for Tamara, where you have a general ledger like credits and debits. So it's easier for the council to see what's coming and what's going. If it were my choice, I would get rid of the columns that just are redundant throughout, but, it would make it more readable. But these things can all happen, with Dave at the helm this coming year. You'll see some
Good.
changes.
It may be useful, and I'm not sure if this is something for the council to consider, but it might be useful to go back to having monthly budget openings. A couple reasons for that. One is that we can react more quickly to a changing budget, so that if we have a need in March, we can actually account for it close to March instead of waiting maybe for the next quarter to look at that. The second is that we can avoid problems when we need to if there's a situation where we need to overspend, we can address it with the council immediately instead of waiting down the road. So I think having regular budget openings, perhaps on a monthly basis, might be better. That way, all of you are not overwhelmed with 3 months of budget openings. It's just 30 days worth. So
And
just a
that's-
suggestion.
Dave and I were having a chat about the budget openings, and I've looked at them, because I spy on you guys from afar, and I look at these budget openings, and they get so long, and then you're just seeing line items, you're not seeing it by department.
That's
Now,
right.
when I was under Tamara, I had to have a budget opening for my department heads every month, and that means when it came to you, it was like 1 page. And you find with upper management, they want something they can look at in 30 to 60 seconds and be able to make sense of it and make their decision on it, or ask questions for more detail. So I think with the.
And very seldom do they always have to jump into the general fund to bring it out.
No, very, usually.
It
you
was
can do
always,
within their
because
own-
it was more frequent, you could cover it within their own budgets.
Right, you have your
And
department
then,
head choose where they want to move it from.
Well, I have a question. When Jess went to part-time, and then there was a bunch of his salary that was not expended for his salary, I think that's how he justified more of the audits and maybe even, like where does his salary come in? The salary savings, did that not offset some of this other needs?
So when, again, back to the olden days when I worked in accounting, we did a line-by-line balancing, like that line didn't get to go below zero unless it came to the council. When Cameron took over, it went to, well, as long as the bottom line of that department still has money, you can spend it as you will. Meaning you can spend $15,000 you don't have for flooring as long as you have it, say, municipal elections or.
That screws up any budget then.
Well, that's what I'm saying, some people don't care that the money's earmarked in government accounting. But it is earmarked, and it's earmarked for a purpose, because the council has authorized it to be spent for that purpose. So hopefully we're headed back in that direction. And like I
Okay, do
said-
we have an answer to Sandy's question?
Yeah, where did the savings from Jess's salary, where did it get absorbed? Where has it been
So
spent?
when you see, if you look back to the 2023, you'll see that I used the full-time employee line to balance out where he'd taken it out of my part-time. Like he had way underfunded my part-time girl. I should have had 24,787 there, and I had 10, I think. So that's how I balanced that. The carpeting and stuff, as you can see down, if you're looking at the 2023, you look down in Department 4, you see we have 20,054 coming out of salary.
Okay.
Because that was Jess's salary that he wasn't using because he was getting paid out of the part-time line. And that was at the.
So that makes sense.
council.
I just wanted to see kind of where that balanced
Yeah,
in.
so
That makes
does
sense.
And
Yes.
then you
Okay.
use that in the clerks also, that we used that to balance it since he wasn't getting paid out of 110.
There's one last item that I'd like to address if I have maybe 2 more minutes. Unless there are any other questions. None of this 2020 budget accounts for any salary increases that were taught, any compensation increases. Specifically, it does not address any compensation increase for the Office of Clerk Auditor. When I became the Clerk Auditor, I was supervising a total of 5 full-time employees. Since the recent change with the new responsibilities in finance, and that has now doubled to 10 people that I'm supervising. By the time we're all done, we'll have about 7 full-time staff in the finance division alone, compared to 6 in the auditor and clerk and elections areas. And so we've increased, I've noticed since I took office, a significant increase in responsibility, not just in staff that I supervise, but also in functional areas. That went up. Now I cover 2 offices and 4 functional areas in those 2 areas. So that's something that you might consider as we go into 2024. And when I first started, again, I'm from the private sector. So when you start a new job in the private sector, you expect to work a lot at the beginning to overcome the learning curve. And for the first 3 months, I was working close to 80 hours a week, 7 days a week, almost without an exception. And that was just part of what I signed up for. That's what I expected. This change with the added financial responsibility is a permanent change that was not a part of that. And I think, to be fair to the current officer, but also future officers, that merits at least a modest increase in salary. So something for you to consider.
Amy proposed, I was spying on you from the other room, she proposed a raise for the clerk auditors to bring it into an average with some of the other counties.
Yes, but that did, but as far as I could tell, it did not account for the extra responsibilities that came on as well. So
But then we
just
gave you a
something
pay
to
cut
consider.
because you got 2 titles, so.
I'm not going to be here forever, but somebody else will. And I think that if we
No.
want to keep people who can
No
cut our
way.
budgets, we need to make sure we get them on board.
Do we have any changes from the council on this 2024 before we submit it?
Not yet.
Yeah.
Everything is subject to change.
Well,
Please.
Seconds in my hand.
inflation and
so.
if that's all holds true, I think they cut it 20% already.
Pardon?
Oh, with our,
Yeah,
yeah,
the
with our red
96,000.
line
Yep.
additions back to fund balance, we did, like I said, we carefully went through every line, especially the ones that were bleeding or hadn't been used. And we went with the 6-year analysis to come up with what he actually needed. And then he came up with those cuts. I find him very, fiscal conservative working with him.
Okay.
Contact me anytime if you have any other questions.